Hey, welcome to the Strategic Success Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Fricke. Thanks for tuning in. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Strategic Success Podcast. Y'all, this is part 2. Last episode, which was the opposite of shiny object syndrome, I talked a lot about clarity. How do you get clarity? Why is it important? And then basically, how do you play defense against shiny object syndrome? In this episode, I want to speak very clearly towards, clarity towards what? And I hope this, I want to share with some authenticity about my journey. And I hope it helps to say that, look, it's different for everyone, but it is something important that you have to figure out. So when I got back started years ago, I started off flipping. And then ultimately I added in some wholesaling with it. So the majority of what I was doing was flipping and wholesaling. After a few years of doing just that, that is when I started adding in buying some rentals or so I first started buying some rentals. So I was maybe 90% flipping and wholesaling and then 10% rentals. And then I started doing more to where basically my pendulum swung all the way into where today I do about 90% buying for, that's hard to say. But like I do a heavy percent buying for rentals or to sell on seller financing. And only a little bit do I wholesale. I rarely flip. If I flip, it's going to be like a wholesale, but I rarely do that. And so, that's been a big change, right? I went from a business that was a lot of today money, right? The flips, the overseeing the flips and handling a lot of, like the day-to-day, having a lot of leads come in and having to kind of go through them and everything being, with wholesale, it was a lot of just low cash offers. And as well as for the flips, and a lot of the money I was raising was short-term money for those flips. Now, when I raise money, it's for people who want to earn consistent returns over a long period of time with my rentals or with the stuff that I'm selling on seller finance. So I think it's important to note a few things. Number one, I want to talk through some of the things that were paramount to those changes, some good, some bad, some ugly, and kind of go from there. I shared last episode that really what I was exposed to early on was just guys who were flipping and wholesaling and building a business, a real estate acquisitions business. And so that's what I did. That's what I emulated. But when I got into real estate, the driving force was I wanted financial freedom, right? Like I wanted to build wealth. Businesses often will build, for most people will build them a salary, right? It's income today. And so when people tell me they want to invest in real estate, one of the number one questions I ask them is, how do you want real estate to serve you? How do you need it to serve you? Because answering that question will help give you some clarity around basically what's that end target you're going towards. And as I said last episode, and I really want to focus on this one, is your path has to be determined by your target, meaning your destination has to be figured out, because you can't just say, I want to invest in real estate. So how do you get clarity around what strategy you want to do and all of that? So I think it's important to understand a few things. That real estate, there's 100 ways you can invest in real estate, and there's 100 different strategies. I mean, there are so many ways to make money. Okay, so it doesn't need you've got to get clear. It's not just I want to just make money in real estate. You got to get more clear with that. There's different types of money you can make with real estate. For example, when I say, hey, how do you want real estate to serve you? One of the big parts I ask is, do you need it to serve you with today money? Are you looking for tomorrow money? or do you need a mixture of the two? So what's today money? Today money is, something relatively soon. Okay. And a lot of that, the flipping, the wholesaling, or for example, if you're a real estate agent earning commissions, a lot of that stuff is going to be today money, meaning in a for example, wholesaling. I mean, I remember my first wholesale deal from when I went under contract to when I got paid was less than 30 days. And so that put money on, in my bank account so I can put food on the table today. I could pay my bills, all of that. Now, most flips take longer, right? It takes a few months. And so, but that's generally today money. While on the other hand, tomorrow money, things like rentals, and ultimately that stuff's going to take a little bit longer. So even though I get paid every month from my rentals, the majority of that, look, I've had rentals at this point for I don't know, 6, 7 years now, and I don't take a penny from my rentals. Everything that is left over at the end of the month, after all expenses are paid, that stays in the bank. Could I pay myself? Sure. I am choosing not to, because why? Rentals need time to build up their reserves. For example, when an AC goes out, and let's just say it's a $5,000 AC, to have to replace it. Well, if you're bringing in, let's just say, a few $100 a month, it's going to take you a lot of months to save up for that AC, right? Or let's just say your monthly mortgage payment is $1,500. Well, and you're only making $200 a month for that rental, right? It's going to take you many months to handle 1 month of vacancy, right? And so I'm giving years of my rentals to build up their accounts, right? So their reserves. And the other part of that is, while you have debt on rentals, it's really hard to live off of them. You generally are going to need volume or no debt, or a higher risk profile or higher management level, such as where it's more like a business. So the Airbnb, or it's like commercial, like self storage or something like that, where it's really more it's a business on top of the real estate. And so it's bringing in more cash flow every month. Okay. And so that's generally speaking. And so a lot of times I say, I ask people, how do you want real estate to serve you? Do you need today money? Meaning, to pay bills today, to put food on the table today? Well, that's where you need to look at either having some sort of job within the real estate industry, right? Where you're getting paid consistently in a paycheck, where you are wholesaling, flipping, either, or even, being a real estate agent with your commission, because then you're getting, that money is coming sooner. Versus, some people say, no, my today money is taken care of. I have a job, I have another source of income, something. That's fine. I'm thinking about tomorrow. I'm thinking about my retirement. I'm thinking about when I stop working, I want something to basically take care of my finances then, right? My needs, right? And so that's, rentals, right? That's hey, I want to start buying them today so they can build up over time, so that when I retire, I've got these rentals that are still supplying when I've stopped working, right? They're still producing. And then you get people who are like, I need a little bit of both. And so for the people who need a little bit of both, one of the biggest things there is, you got to prioritize one over the other. Again, it's really hard to build both from early on. And so you've got to say, which one do you need more now? Maybe you're like, hey, look, I'm okay right now with the today money part, although I would like some of that, or I'll need some of that eventually. You can say, hey, look, I'm a little bit older. I need to get started on the rental thing sooner rather than later. Then boom, right? You can start that. Or maybe you're saying, hey, look, I'm younger. I've got plenty of time with the rental part. Let me focus on the today money part. And then, which was my journey. I focused on the today money part, got that rolling. And then I had this epiphany. And this epiphany was like that, my epiphany was that I got into real estate for the wealth building part, but I spent so many years focusing on the today money part. And I just felt like I was just spinning my wheel. I was like I was going back to work for a salary all over again, right? And so I get that. And that's actually part of the reason why I regret leaving my job so soon, because then real estate only became about today money for those early years. And although I learned so many great skills, so like with wholesaling and flipping, I learned a lot of great skills. There's a part of me that wished I would have stayed at my job sooner and just focused on rentals. Okay. Last episode, I kind of talked about when your goal is one thing, a lot of people shortchange it. A lot of people say, "Hey, my goal is really rentals, but I'm going to wholesale or flip right now just to save up money." Because the issue with rentals is the money part, right? Well, again, that's kind of like saying I want to own a restaurant with a brick and mortar, but because the money part's an issue, I'm going to go learn this different skill of having a catering business, right? And so a lot of people say, "Hey, go start with flipping or wholesaling, and then eventually get into rentals." I kind of get I understand the logic, but I'm like, look, if your goal, if how you need real estate to serve you is through that tomorrow money with rentals, then I want to encourage you, figure out if the obstacle is money, figure out the money part, right? Like spend your effort not in learning the new skill of wholesaling or the new skill of flipping if you don't need to solve the today money problem. But then I want to encourage you, if the goal is rentals, then I want to encourage you towards, ultimately, um, getting clear on that, handling the objection, and spending your effort towards learning the skill of, for example, creative financing, raising private money, learning how to get funding from banks, all of that, if that's truly the issue. So I think too many people are, like myself, I just got into flipping because, again, that was the exposure I got, and I needed today money, right? And then I was getting burned out. And I was getting burned out because what I really dreamed of was financial freedom and ultimately time freedom. And I was burned out because I was working 80 hours a week, flipping and wholesaling and building this business and all that, with all these, scaling problems and all this. And here I am just starting to get burned out. I'm not getting any closer towards financial freedom and time freedom, or so it felt. And so here's something that I think is really important. You got to get clear on where you're going. So the first thing you have to understand is, what do I need today? How do I need real estate to serve me? If it's today money, it's tomorrow money, you got to get clear on that. Okay. If it's a mixture of both, you need to get clear on which one do you need more than the other right now, and then start there and eventually graduate to the other. So that's important. But then you've got to get really clear. Here's the other problem is, okay, so then I started getting rentals. Here was one of my problems is I was all burned out on chasing the today money. I almost did it too much of a pendulum swing because I needed both, right? And so I needed, because I was doing real estate full time, I did the pendulum swing to rentals, and I was almost doing rentals too much, and I was almost forgetting my today money stuff, right? To where I was property rich, cash poor. So that's part of the reason why I wish I would have kept the job and just gone right into rentals, to where I was not, property rich, cash poor, but I was having something that was putting food on the table, the job. And my last job was, they were not micromanaging me. Yeah, I didn't love it. Yeah, it gave me headaches, and things like that. And I wish I could have more, things, but generally speaking, I had a lot of freedom in that job. And part of me wish I would have stayed in that and then just gone into the rentals, to where, because part of my issue was I did that pendulum swing. I went from a lot of today money to where I was focusing a lot on tomorrow money, but I did not keep the today money going as much. A little bit, but not as much. And so I'd be over here and in the rental world, building that, portfolio for tomorrow, knowing I needed reserves. Well, I say knowing because when I first bought rentals, one of my first lessons I learned was I bought too many and I didn't have enough reserves. So guess what? When the tenant stopped paying, Where did the mortgage get paid? I bought these rentals subject to the existing loans. I got into them with little to no money down. But guess what? Rentals cost you money between vacancies, tenants not paying or being vacant. And then repairs, I didn't have the proper reserves. I bought too many rentals at one time and I didn't have the reserves. So therefore, what happened? It had to come out of my own pocket, right? Whenever the tenant wasn't paying, but the note was still due, I had to pay for it. Whenever there was an issue and I had to get a repair done, but I didn't have reserves for repairs, who paid for it? I did. And so that's something that it's important to understand. Now, you say, Courtney, how do I get clarity on what I want, and all this? And so, as I started to explain last episode, I believe clarity comes from trial and error as well as exposure. But I also believe, to take it a step further, I believe it comes from understanding what you value. So let me break this down. A big question you have to answer, and this was probably one of the biggest questions I had to answer early on. And this is whether you're doing today money or tomorrow money, right? Whether you're doing the stuff like flipping and wholesaling, more the business stuff of real estate, the business building part, or rentals, right? And building a portfolios, you have to understand that you're going to have to answer the question for either one of those. How big do you want to build the monster? So that was a really big question for me. So I was flipping and wholesaling, and there was a level that, I was not doing one deal a year. Eventually I got to where I was doing a lot of deals a year. And I mean, that's where it came with the teams. I had to bring on people. I had to constantly be getting deal flow. And by asking the question is, how big do I want to, build the monster? To answer that question, okay, so on the flipping, let's just say the today money, the flipping and wholesaling, I mean, that's the question around volume, right? Are you going to want to do, a higher end deal or a deal with a bigger potential of spread, and you just do one, like for example, a deal with $100,000 in profit after everything's accounted for, and do you try to just do one of those a year, or do you try to do 5 deals that'll net you 20,000, right? You got to kind of figure that part out, right? Because doing 5 deals, finding a one deal that'll net you 100,000 a year does take effort. Finding deals that'll net you 20,000 and finding 5 of them might be more possible, but then you're dealing with 5 different deals throughout the year, right? Now, so you've got that question. Then on the rental side, you got the question of, I thought that, it's either own 100 properties or don't own any. Like, it was weird, but all the squeaky wheels on the internet, all they said was, you just got to buy. You just have to own a lot. And as I met Leon Johnson, eventually Pete Fortunato, John Schaub, those folks really introduced me to a new way of thinking, where you've got to figure out, especially on the rental side, look, owning more properties is not always better. No one talks about that. One of my favorite books to recommend, you've heard me talk about it a ton, it's Building Wealth One House at a Time with John Schaub. This is the 3rd edition. I have given this book out a ton. So Building Wealth One House at a Time with John Schaub. He's one of my top mentors. He's been investing since 1975. And that book, as well as meeting those guys, helped me start to understand that my goal of having hundreds of properties as rentals was like, why did I choose that metric? And I think this is where it's important to understand, when you hear certain metrics, what are you attracted to? So the name of this episode is Lamborghinis or extended vacations. So I think it's important for you to understand when asking the question of how big do you want to build the monster, because understand whatever your goal is, you have to define your goal because as we talked about, your path is going to be determined, right? The process you have to take, that path is going to be determined by your target, right? Your destination. And so to determine your target or your destination of where you want to end up, it's going to look different. If you want to own one property or if you want to own 100, if you want to flip one house a year or 100, it's going to look very different. So you have to determine exactly what it looks like because everything from your team to how long it's going to take to how you're going to raise the money, how many deals you need coming through, all of that's going to look different. But it comes down to these things, right? What do you value and what are you attracted to? How do you define success?
Hey guys, Courtney Fricke here. We've got Aussie Steve. And look, if you have a deal that needs to get moved, Southeast Louisiana, even in South Mississippi, we're your folks. We are the largest dispo company, really in the greater New Orleans area, even Southeast Louisiana. We have great contacts in South Mississippi as well. Steve, why do we move more deals than others?
Just we're very deep in this market, so Greater New Orleans can be really confusing for national wholesalers. The comps are hard. We change block for block. We got flood zones. We get a lot of hurricanes and the likes, and just a lot of the national platforms don't have the buyers on their list. So we are deep with buyers, but we're deep with relationships, which is really important in this market. So we love JVing with out-of-state investors.
Like I said, we do a ton of business with other investors. So go to homebuyerlouisiana.com/Courtney. Fill out the information, we'll get in touch with you and we'll move this deal along.
So early on, I literally thought if you only owned a few properties, you were not successful. And I thought the more properties you own equaled the more successful you were. And that was a horrible metric. Why? Because I just saw on the internet, everyone cared about numbers, right? That the more properties you own, the more, bravado you had, right? And so then what did I early on chase? I chased owning more, having more, right? But then I realized the cost associated with doing so. I realized, so believe it or not, when I got started, I actually had I call it a 2-pack ab, but I was in the best shape of my life. And through entrepreneurship, right, my body took score of just the stress, the lifestyle of being an entrepreneur. I'm not saying you can't be uber healthy and be an entrepreneur, but there was just, there was so many times where I couldn't go on vacation in those early beginning building years, or I'd go on vacation and be working, where, a lot of things happened, right? And, just because what I was trying to obtain was such a big goal, and it was it required so much that I just had my head down and I was grinding. And so I went through a season where I really questioned what my target and destination was. And this was huge, y'all. It was huge for me. And ultimately, I had to ask that question is, what am I trying to actually build here? What am I trying to actually attain? And how do I define success? How do I know if I got there? And so now in the middle of my vision board, I have a quote that says, success for me, right? It has to be defined individually. I cannot take Joe Blow's vision of success and say, that's going to be Courtney's, right? Now I can be influenced by it, but it has to be tailored to me. And so on my vision board, it says, success to me is defined when my family sees me more than my phone or my work, right? That's very hard, right? Because what happened in those beginning years, my family saw me very little, right? Compared to how much my phone and the work saw me, right? Because, you put your head down, you're grinding, you're having to build, right? And so ultimately that's where I'm looking. That is what I value, right? I grew up with parents who either out of necessity or by choice put their head down and had to work very, very, very hard. And, as a result, there wasn't always time for family, or it was at the expense of family at times. Now, I love them and I'm thankful for them, but at the same time, that was something I grew up with. And I said, that's not what I want. I'm in my mid 30s, hoping to start a family here soon. I actually just recently got back from a trip and recently got engaged. And as we, are planning our life out, these are the big questions I'm asking, right? Is what do I want? What type of life do I want to build? When you think about strategic success, like what am I strategically trying to build by design? And ultimately, when I think about what I value financial freedom, meaning when I think of financial freedom, I think of, you know, not having to stress over money. The other thing when I think of financial freedom is if I had either myself or a loved one had a major, major health issue, and let's just say it was $100,000 to get them this life saving surgery, I would want the financial freedom to be able to write that check and not be able to blink an eye, right? Um, there's a level that when I think of financial freedom, that's what I want to think of. Something that can carry me through the older ages, right? But one of the other things is I also want to retire before I'm 40. Like that's one of my goals is I want to retire before I'm 40, and I'm still defining what retirement looks like. That's important, right? Again, when you use big, vague words, it's really hard to say, have I attained this or not? So I'm still trying to figure out how I want to define retirement because, we're addicted to real estate and I love doing deals. And so I don't think it's not doing deals, but it might be, I might do deals differently. I might just partner with folks. I might, do less volume, all of that. So, with that being said, I value time freedom. So, financial freedom, that also leads to time freedom. And, I want to be present. So, I just got back from being in France for 2.5 weeks. And during that time, I actually shut my phone down the majority of the time. I did not have international roaming. My partner did for when we needed a GPS for, when we were going from site to site in Paris or when we were driving the rental car through the countryside. There's practical reasons for having that phone, right? I did not want it. I want it to not be as accessible. I want it to not have to think about work. And so I turned it off for the majority of the time. I pulled in, I turned it on and used Wi-Fi from time to time. But for the most part, I was enjoying that. My phone was mostly just a camera, right? And so I enjoyed that. And I really got to connect with my partner. I really got to enjoy the experience of what we were, getting to see while in France, right? And so I came back and I asked on social media, I said, guys, how many of you guys for 2.5 weeks would you have been thinking about work the entire time? Or would you have been, able to turn your brain off? Man, you guys sounded off in the comments, right? So many people are like, I'm still in the building phase of my business, so I have to think 24/7 about my business. I can't afford to turn it off. Or I love this stuff too much, I can't turn it off. And those are great things to point out. But I want to kind of give some thoughts on that. First of all, I would still consider myself in the building phase because I'm not quite there yet. And I'll explain about that here in a second. And I understand the building phase because look, we started this tradition last year with my partner where we've been going on longer trips. So, 2 to 3 week trips. And so call that long, call that not long, but for us, that was long. And so last year we went to Asia for 3 weeks, and this year we went to France for 2.5 weeks. And I mean, it takes effort. So leading up to the trip, it took a lot of effort. I've got, 5 different property managers, so I had to get all of them lined up for my rentals to know that I was gone. Hey, are all the invoices paid? Is there any known issues? What happens? Let's talk through what'll happen if something comes up during the trip, all of that. And then, it's me contacting, I have a few business partners that I have, portfolios with. And so I'm like, hey guys, I'm preparing to leave. What do you need from me? Handling, teeing things up to be gone, but handling things. Just a lot of other things, right? And so leading up to it, it was stressful, but it took effort because what one of my goals was, right? Remember how I defined success was I wanted to be more present with family and than my work. And although it's not 24/7 that way, I'm trying to be more intentional with that. And so because my goal on the trip was to be more present, I had to tee it up in a certain way, right? Now, you may say, Courtney, but that's not my goal. I want to have homes in 7 countries and I want to have 15 vehicles and a private jet and a helicopter. I can understand that, right? But when you look at my vision board, for me, I might have a few material things on there, but for me, it is a lot more about time freedom, retiring my significant other. It is about, um, you know, actually having, not everything fully paid off, but a lot of my personal stuff paid off and my investments maybe partially paid off. Those are some of the things that I value. Look, I drive a 2023 Toyota and it's a 4 cylinder, it gets great fuel mileage, and I plan on running that thing to the ground, right? I've never been one where I'm like, I don't dream about having a sports car. I say, okay, hey, maybe in a few years I might get an old school Jeep to kind of run around in the mountains and in the countryside and on the beach. But I don't dream about luxury. That's never been a that's never been a high value of mine. Now, on this trip to France, we did have two, I guess you could say, a few luxury experiences. And so I guess I do like the idea of luxury experiences over luxury things, meaning, so we stayed at a chateau in the countryside that was beautiful. And now we stayed in the cheapest room, and I want to say it was 350 a night, and we stayed there for, I don't know, 4 nights. It was such a phenomenal experience, right? The staff there were great. And we had dinner there one night at their, it was a very nice restaurant, and it was probably 250 bucks. We ate at a number of higher end restaurants, um, that were anywhere from the bill was anywhere for 2 people from 150 to 350. So, we're not always doing that every night, but we enjoyed that, right? Um, we flew business class. So last year flying to Asia, it was a 14-hour flight, and we were in normal economy tickets, and we just looked at my partner. I looked at my partner, and on the flight there, we sat next to each other, but on the flight back, something happened with our seats and we couldn't be next to each other, and they were stuck next to someone who did not want to get up on a 14-hour flight, and it was miserable. And we're just like, never again. So we figured it out. Kiyosaki taught us in Rich Dad Poor Dad, it's not I can't afford, it's how can you afford. So we bought business seats, which are the ones that like lay back, they lay down, you have your own little like cubicle. It's like, they do have first class on some of those flights, but and even though it was only a 7 to 8 hour flight to France, we were able to do it basically on a better term with these seats. Now, these are $4,000 to $5,000 seats per person, and these tickets were, very expensive, right? So what did we do? We learned how to do credit card hacking and just use some of our expenses that we were going to pay for anyway. We just did that to be able to pay for it. And we like that luxury experience, right? And then lastly, on the trip, we stayed at the Chateau de Versailles. In Versailles, there is a hotel that was renovated historically, and like it was a wild experience. My partner loves history, loves that era, and it was a very long dream of theirs to stay there. And so we stayed. I mean, we were literally assigned a butler in our room. They're like, what temperature do you want it at? What size for your custom pajamas? Like, they had stuff monogrammed for us at our arrival into the room. All the staff knew our name. So as you can imagine, that one was a little pretty penny, to the tune of about 2,500, I think 2,700 for the entire stay of a one night stay there. And that was our big splurge. They got us 2 private tours with Versailles, and one of them was after hours. So again, for those of you who didn't follow along with my journey, I shared most of it on my Facebook. So if you go to courtneyfricke.com, you can see the Facebook where you can follow me. But I would post there, and so that we did an after hours tour. Versailles gets like 1,000 visitors a day, maybe even more. And so it's super crowded, but because we were literally right on the grounds of Versailles with our hotel, what they did is we had an after hour tour of Versailles, a part of the tour of Versailles. And so the hotel hired us some guides, and we literally went through the Hall of Mirrors, which is a very famous part of Versailles. It was like basically the waiting chambers to go see Louis the 14th or Louis the 15th, I forget which one. And it's this hall that's just full of mirrors. It has a phenomenal view, and very ornate room, massive room. And usually when you have all these tourists there, it's packed to the gills. We had less than 8 people in that room. I mean, this room was like more than a football field. Like, it was huge. And so we got to take photo shoots. We got like all these awesome opportunities, right, in that room. And then as we were leaving, there was a side event happening after hours at Versailles. And so they sent us out an exit, and right next to it, we see a motorcade pull up, and it's literally the president of France and the president of Vietnam were arriving. And from here to my front door is where they were. And there was, maybe not even 20 of us on the tour, and so we got to see some things like that. The hotel gave us we got a golf cart to go view the grounds with, and they actually also gave us access to their boat, and we got to go through the canal on their boat, where all the other boats you can pay to use were like rowboats. Ours had a little, outboard motor. And so we got to view Versailles by boat. And like a lot of little things we really, really enjoyed. Am I going around spending that type of money every time I travel? No. We live below our means. We're generally, I'm not going to say overly frugal, but we're generally frugal, right? And mindful with our money, but we do value experiences and memories and, just stuff like that, right? But I understand some of you on your vision board have a Lamborghini, you have, a very exotic home or mansion or whatever. Like, I get that. We have different goals. That is why you cannot take my goals and take the path that it took me to get to my goal and just say, I'm going to copy and paste. Unless you want exactly what I want, which, let's be honest, no one exactly wants what the other wants, which is why clarity comes from exposure and trial and error, okay? Because let's be honest, I thought I wanted some of the other things, and I realized that wasn't what I valued in life, right? Maybe you meet the love of your life and you realize you get more clarity with that, or maybe you meet someone who's I don't know, maybe someone who values, time freedom and certain things, marries someone who values materialistic things. And I'm not saying they're exclusive of each other, right? I guess that's my point. And so with that being said, it is very important that you have clarity. And then ultimately, so let me continue a little bit further with my journey. When I met Leon, he introduced me to his mentor, Pete Fortunato, who's now the biggest influence in my investing career. Pete, as I started spending a lot of time with Leon and Pete, I realized, first of all, Leon and Pete are both in their 70s. and they have been investing since the 1960s and 1970s. Both of them are still very actively investing today. So decades of investing. By spending a lot of time with them, I learned a lot. And one of the things is, John Schaub says this as well, is just, you don't need a ton of houses. And I guess that was so polarizing, from you need 1,000 doors to someone saying you really need 10 houses or less, right? So polarizing. So there is a level that I had to go through a soul searching journey to say, what do I really want? How big do I want to build this monster? What am I trying to actually do? And so during that, it was really around 2019 into 2020, I got very clear. And so, now it took me some time to deconstruct, and then now I'm working towards building toward my clarity. So I've talked about this before. I want 25 nice houses in nice neighborhoods. So 1990 or newer, in desirable school districts, great areas. I want a minimum of 1,500 in rent, and for them to be worth 200 to around 450. So kind of in that range. The average house in my area is worth 275. So to give you an idea. And so, like, when you think about these, I call these my legacy properties. So when I do a deal and it's a legacy deal, I mean, that means a lot to me, because this is where I'm trying to arrive, is this legacy portfolio of the 25 houses. And so and this has come from clarity, right? So I want those 25 nice houses, and there's a definition, call it a buy box, of those houses. And that's phase one, is acquisition of those. And because that's important. But I learned the more clarity you have, the more you can say yes or no to things, right? And because not everything is an opportunity to you, right? You've got to understand that saying yes to one thing means saying no to another. And so if you can get good at saying no, your yes can be very strong. So first, phase one is acquiring those 25. I have 56 properties right now. Only 5 of them are those 25. So I am doing a lot of reconstructing with those 57, right? There's ones that I own with partners that are means to an end for the 25, right? Some of them I am selling on financing. I'm turning them from renting to selling on seller financing, to know that, hey, when they pop off and sell, then I'm going to use that to buy another for the 25, right? So one of my first set of goals is those 25. And I've, again, defined what that house looks like, very clear. The age of the home matters to me, right? The location, the school district. I really want it to be a house that people want to be living in, okay? And then on top of that, and these are long-term rentals, by the way, because I want ease of management. And on the other side of that is the second phase, is I want to restructure that debt. A lot of these properties I have acquired, so the nicer neighborhoods are hard to get at a deep discount, cash-wise. So a lot of them are with subject to. Inherently, I believe subject to debt has risk. And so a part of my goal is, I don't want 25 ticking time bombs, right? With, the fear that the seller is going to file bankruptcy, or they're going to die, or go through a divorce, or the due on sale clause is going to be triggered, or litigation is going to happen in the industry, and therefore regulation is going to happen with subject twos. I don't want to like say, oh, I got my 25, and then be fearing that, right? So the second phase is then to restructure my debt. So whether that's paying some of them off, whether that is refinancing it with different type of debt, whatever that looks like. And so understand, phase one is acquisition, phase two is restructuring debt. And so that was something I really learned from Pete and Leon and them, is it's that idea of, don't just say, oh, I want to end up and have like a dollar sign in mind, but like, what do I want my quality of life? Because think about it. They often told a story about how, 3 or 4 couples went traveling to Europe, and they were having such a good time. They're like, guys, let's, money's not an issue. Let's go and extend our trip for another week and let's go see, Barcelona or whatever. But there was a guy who had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rentals, and he said, I can't stay away from home this long. Right. So all the other guys who had smaller portfolios had more time freedom, and none of them money was an issue. Right. And so for him, the guy with, more, it really was more a business he was running, and his staff he couldn't be that long away from his staff, right? And so it's like this idea of, how do you want to arrive, right? What type of debt do you want on your, portfolio when you retire? Where do you want them to, what condition do you want them to be in? Think about things like, the major repairs, like the roofs, the ACs, all that. Do you want to retire and have, 10 houses, but 10 of them need new roofs and ACs, right? Think about that. There's things that I am planning towards my legacy portfolio, because I am thinking, okay, I am still actively building in my building phase, but at the same time, I'm very clear on what I want, very clear on what it needs to look like, and kind of going from there. So, with that being said, that clarity has helped me say yes or say no. And I want to start wrapping it up here, but another part of that is, I don't want to say, if you like material things, if that's what you value, I don't want to say that's a bad thing. It's not. You've just got to get around people who, it like, you grow into the conversations you're around. I want to encourage you to surround yourself with people who value things similar to what you value. A lot of the people who enjoy my content are people who enjoy, for example, time freedom. They enjoy the idea of buying properties, with creative financing for rentals, and they're thinking about, financial freedom and things like that. If people generally don't follow me for business advice, building and scaling, they don't follow me for a lavish lifestyle, like, that's just not, that's not me. And so I want you to evaluate who are you attracted to, in the sense of like their lifestyle, and the content you listen to. Because some people early on, I feel like sometimes, again, the squeakiest wheel, the squeakiest door is the ones who are the loudest on social media. And I'll be honest, it's weird, but a lot of people respond to like posting a check or a fancy car or whatever. But the reality is like, that's not all that's out there. And so going back to that question of how big do I want to build this, the question is, what do you want? Again, if you want 100 properties or 1,000 doors, the price you have to pay, both literally and physically, with your life, will look different than if you wanted 10 properties. And so that is something that I think is really important. It's not impossible. Real estate is not rocket science, but it's also not easy. But more than that, look, it is imperative to understand that the average person can buy average properties in average areas and collect average rents, but build an extraordinary level of wealth. There's a level here that it doesn't have to be extreme, but no matter what, you have to define what success looks like for you. A lot of people struggle because they do not define it, so therefore they don't know when they've attained it. Now, granted, over the years, my goals have shifted a little bit. So you will have seasons of life where your goals will change, because maybe you get married, you have more kids, something major happens and your goals change, right? What you value changes. People are allowed to change, right? But I think it is important. So if you want to invest in real estate, or if you're like saying, hey, Courtney, I have been, going at this thing for years, and I just feel like I've just been grinding, but I'm grinding to what end? I want to encourage you to seek out clarity, right? I want to encourage you to say, hey, no, what exactly, and get granular. There's a very common exercise called the perfect day, where you literally write out from, when you first wake up to when you go to bed, in detail. What do you smell? What do you eat? Who do you see? What do you touch? What do you hear? Like, in granular detail, like, like, I don't want to say minute by minute, but very granular detail. What do you do on the perfect day? Right? Um, I mean, a lot of times for me, when I would do that exercise, I was in the outdoors. We were, in a house in the mountains, and we went out to the lake. We swam some. We cooked together. We ate great food. We got around a fire. We read. You know, there's a lot of things, right? And so everyone's perfect day looks different. It's who are you with? It's what do you do? Where are you at? Like all of these things. And so I just want, I understand the grind and the hustle. I just want to say, don't be married to the grind and the hustle for no reason. And I'm also not a fan of the hustle being forever. Um, Coach Chad Carson was on a previous episode and he talked about doing mini retirements. And I am in love with that idea because even though I'm still building, we're wanting to take, these trips and pull back, have some time to connect, but yet know I'm still building, right? Because what I want is I want my family to say, hey, look, I know I'm still putting my head down. Like I've got some gray hairs, and these gray hairs have been growing and over the years because this business, again, it's not rocket science, but it's not easy. I've put in the reps, I've put in the hours. And yeah, we're seeing some fruit, but I'm not fully where I want to be yet. But what I want my family to know is I want to take time and invest in my family and say, hey, this is what we're working towards. And so I'm not a fan of you have to grind so much that you don't give yourself permission to take a break. And so that 2.5 week trip for me is that break to where I set it up to where I say, hey, the hustle and grind can wait. I am coming back, but I want my family to get a taste of what we're working towards. And it's this idea that we're not having to wait until we're 60 to go on these trips. We're not having to, you know, ultimately say, oh, look, I'm grinding, I'm hustling to get XYZ, just hold out for years until I get XYZ. No, I want to say, hey, hold on. Let's celebrate today. Let's be present today. Let's enjoy along the way together what we're building. And guys, it is so important that you define success for yourself. Please do not borrow someone else's dream. Okay? I want to encourage you, if this is resonating with you, to take some time and to really deep dive what you're actually trying to do. Hey, say, hey, look, is what I'm doing on a daily and weekly, a monthly, yearly basis helping me towards what I'm trying to build? Because I'll be honest, I was going towards something that I ultimately didn't want. And so I had to restructure. I do not want 100 deals a year. Why? Because I want some time freedom while I'm ultimately going toward time freedom. And we're talking about retirement. I want to retire by the time I'm 40, but I really love real estate. And so I'm currently just trying to define what retirement will look like in a few years, because the reality is I can't just shut this off. Maybe that's where I still do a few workshops a year. But I'm only doing, 10 deals a year versus, 30 to 50 like I currently do, right? Like those are things that I'm like, what do I value? What does success look like for me? Success for me does not equal zero real estate when I quote unquote retire. You got to define it, my friends. I want to encourage you. I want to encourage you and call you into this clarity, because once I got this clarity, deals flowed to me more, especially since I run a referral based business, because people knew more of what I was clearer on my message to people on what I was looking for, right? At the end of the day, you've got to, that clarity bleeds over into other things. It bleeds over. My family understands. That is a very, I've got on the wall here, it's very clear. It's literally the buy box outlined on the wall over here. And so my family sees it literally. Hold on, let's see. We go this way. You see right here, you see how it's 5 of the 25 is built in, is colored in. I mean, it's very clear for my family. And so for those of you who are listening, I have a sign on my door. It's literally called the Freedom Plan. And it's step 1, step 2. And by the way, step 3 is maintain desirable assets, trade up less desirable assets into better collateral as necessary. And so literally I have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Because I have defined my target so clearly, like it is so clear, it is a clear yes or no. And I then was able to build backwards my action plan. Phase 1, the acquisition. Phase 2, it was restructuring the debt. Phase 3 is just maintenance, right? And the reality there, and at the bottom, I do have timeline goals for phase 1, timeline of when I want to have it done by December of 2026. Step 2 is the restructuring. I want that done by December of 2030. And step 3, phase 3 is as necessary. Like that clarity, you guys, is allowing me to have a competitive advantage. Okay. And I can tell you so much of my business. I mean, this clarity can help, it can help me by establishing what you value. You can fight against burnout. You can fight against shiny object syndrome. Leon Johnson talks about freedom and peace. You've got to decide what will freedom and peace look like for you, right? When someone comes to me, so I want my 25 properties, by the way, to be single family, and that is on purpose, right? That is on purpose. So if someone comes to me with a multifamily deal or a mobile home park, that might be something I partner with a partner on, but it's not for the legacy properties, right? Because of that level of clarity. So again, it allows me to say yes or allows me to say no. And I want to encourage you that your path will be determined by your target and your destination. And so if you are like, hey, my path is frustrating, I am not getting the results I want, I am going to argue the first thing you need to look at is clarity. Again, to re-say that quote that I kind of manipulated from Charlie Munger, it's that idea that clarity for real estate investors, without clarity, you are like a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest, right? You can't really play offense and you can't really play defense, right? So there's a level there. I want to encourage you to get clear. Now, it might take some time, right? It did not come overnight. I did not go away for a weekend and come back with clarity. Maybe you can. But for me, it took some time. And that has been huge. I mean, my entity structures have been able to be built around this clarity. The deals I say yes to, the type of financing I get is built around this type of clarity. So with that being said, I hope you got some value out of today's episode. Guys, feel free, if you go to @Courtney Fricke on social media or CourtneyFricke.com, I've got, my monthly newsletter. There's a lot of resources there, like my monthly newsletter that I send out, strategic thoughts. I've also got the YouTube channel, which has these podcast episodes as well as some additional content. You got some opportunities there as well as social media where I post. I want to encourage you guys that if anything, I hope, whether your goals resemble my goals or not, I hope for clarity for you. Because at the end of the day, I have seen the fruit that it has allowed, me to face and to witness. And I hope that ultimately you are able to get your own taste of clarity. Appreciate you guys tuning in to another episode here at the Strategic Success Podcast. Appreciate you guys. Until next time.